Welcome to the Vineyard Church podcast. For more information, visit us at vkcwest.com.
We're doing a series on relationships. We're actually finishing it up today. And so we've talked about friendship. We've talked about marriage. We've talked about parenting. We've talked about coworkers. And then today we talk about neighbors. Okay. And so, we're going to talk about the people that live closest to us. And I will tell you, the theme for this whole series has been this idea of we're able to love our people in our relationships to the extent that we receive the love of Jesus. And if that's true with the other relationships, it sure is true with our neighbors, isn't it? Right? Like the need to have love beyond ourselves, right? That is so important because you typically don't choose your neighbors. You choose your house or you choose your apartment, and then you just kind of hold and grip it and say, I hope the neighbors are great. And what's funny is the same neighbors, they're like, I hope they're great, and then whatever happens. But our theme verse for the series has been, so now I am giving you a new commandment. This is Jesus speaking. Love each other just as I have loved you. You should love each other. And so Jesus gives us this picture that we're able to love other people with what he gives us. And so to the extent that I'm this open vessel and I'm receiving will be to the extent that I can love other people as well. And so neighbors are the ones that are in closest proximity to us. Because I know, especially too, and we have some real rural areas around here. You may say, I don't have any neighbors and I love it. Right. And so, but you still have you may have acres of land and you still have some neighbors, those people right around you across the way, or no matter how long it takes you to get there, you still have the people that you're in closest proximity to. I was thinking about my childhood and all these pictures came to mind, pictures that are maybe at my mom's house when I go visit and I'm reminded of my childhood, and I'll see, that kid and those people we live near. And I grew up out in the country. So we had, big, long dirt road, and we were the first house to the right on the dirt road. But then up here, the two brothers and family that moved in from LA, and I learned all sorts of things from them, and stuff. They're a little bit older, and I got in my first fist fight that I instigated because he told me to, and all kinds of stuff, right? But then I think of like birthday parties. Those same kids were there, meals with neighbors, and playing sports with those families. When we built our home on our land, my dad is a contractor, and so we built that, and some of the neighbors came and helped us put up the roof in certain parts of the home, and so all of those good times. But we also experienced learning creative language from neighbors. That kind of stuff. Insults, right? Experienced my first insults from my neighbors. I learned what gossip was from neighbors. Learned judgment too, right? Like, who do they think they are, and look at them, and they do, right? They're in closest proximity to you. And so your neighbors are the people you compare yourself to, and all this different stuff. And so we have good and bad experiences with neighbors. And when we talk about the neighbor relationship, though, it definitely is it's this action. It's neighboring is what we're talking about. Because if we approach our neighbors and our neighborhoods like this passive way, just kind of like it is what it is, and whatever comes at me, then it's not a great experience. But if we decide that we're going to neighbor like it's a thing, then it really changes things quite a bit. So neighboring is an action. It's proactive. And I believe that a good neighbor can transform a neighborhood. I believe a good neighbor can transform a city. A good neighbor can transform a state. A good neighbor can transform the nation. And a good neighbor can transform the world, I believe, right? I mean, yesterday, right, we celebrated 20 years or remembered 20 years of 9/11. And I'll tell you, there was like waves of like kind of grieving and emotion. Michelle had a young man that she went to high school with, was in the Twin Towers and passed away. And remember going to his funeral, and then one of my childhood friends, his mom, who I knew well, she was on one of the planes and kind of just walked through, wow, lots of stuff. And you look at that, and I was just thinking, I said, people are so creative. Like, we're so creative at finding ways to hurt one another. That's what was so shocking about the whole thing, is just, like, nobody knew at first, like this, you see one, oh, this is an accident. You see another, oh, wow, we found a new way to harm one another, hurt one another. And so we have this incredible propensity to create ways that we interact with each other, and for hate and hurt, or for good and love. And I just think that the answer, like what we need now, is good neighbors, because, whether it's on the other side of the world, where, the terrorists lived, if they had good neighbors, maybe that wouldn't have happened. Maybe, here, the things we experience, maybe if we're good neighbors, those things wouldn't happen. And so that's what we need. And this is really at the heart of Christianity. People wonder, well, what's Christianity about? It's being a good neighbor, being a loving neighbor. Absolutely. And it's at the heart, because it's at the heart of Jesus. This is what Jesus talked about. And there was a day that a religious ruler spoke to Jesus, and he was asking him questions, and he was trying to test him and have him answer wrong. And so he asked the question, and he said, what's the most important thing to God? Like, what's the greatest of the commandments that God has given? And so this is the answer that Jesus gave. He said, and you must love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind, and all your strength. And so, essence, if you look at the 10 commandments, the first 5 commandments, you look at those, have to do with relationship with God, and the next 5 have to do with relationship with others. And so Jesus, in his brilliance, shares, okay, it's relationship and love for God. And then he goes into the next, which is relationship with others. The second is equally important. Love your neighbor as yourself. No other commandment is greater than these. And so Jesus responded that the second thing only to loving God is to love your neighbor. Like that's where it's at. Like, that's what's happening. So here's a question for us. What if Jesus was just making it really easy on us? In narrowing down the cliff notes of life. Like, what if one were to become an expert at these verses here and just said, you know what? I'm going to go after this. I'm going to make this my main priority. I'm going to be in right relationship with God and love him and be loved by him. And I'm going to be in right relationship with others and love them and be loved by them. If that were the main priority, right? And then when the problem is, though, stuff happens, right? Like, I'm good until I get around another person, right? Like, everything was going great until that person got in my way or did a different thing. And so we need something more. We need to understand more. And, you'll see that around here. We talk about this quite a bit. This isn't a new verse to be read to you, but it is something that I would love for us to master, that we would be people that love God and love people. So I think that's the answer that we need today, because really a good neighbor changes the world. And think about it, like, you're positioned to actually influence, not just across the street, but to really influence the world. You may have heard of the butterfly effect, where they look at butterflies and in the small effect that they have and how it changes things and ripples all throughout the world. And I mean, it's all around, just small little things that just, change, weather patterns and all sorts of things. It's all around us. God has given us this design to see how small little things influence others. That the Bible actually is that's the theme of the Bible, is you have a really big God who's mighty and powerful and incredible and created everything, and yet he's come near, and then he uses small things to change the world and for his purposes. And so each of us is uniquely positioned because we really have people all around us. And so who is my neighbor? You may be asking. Well, in Luke, there's another discussion with Jesus where a religious leader asked Jesus, what must I do to inherit eternal life? How can I be saved? You see that all throughout Scripture too. It's a good question. We should ask God that. What is the way? Well, Jesus asks him, he says, well, how do you read the law? Like, how do you read the Pentateuch? The first 5 books of the Old Testament. How do you read it? What do you read there? And so the man answers with the same thing that Jesus answered with. And so it wasn't, I don't know, maybe he heard Jesus. I don't know which one was first or before, but it was like he answers with the same thing that Jesus said. And he says, the man answered, you must love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your strength, and all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. And so Jesus is getting at his heart. Jesus would always start kind of wide, and then he would kind of get to, what are your motives? What's your hang up? What's going on inside of you? And so the man answers, good. And Jesus says, good, do this and you'll live. And the guy's kind of like, wait a minute. What's going on here? I asked you how I can be saved. And he's like, so what the man does is, it says that he wanted to justify himself. And so he wanted to kind of find a loophole. He wanted to make sure, like, hey, I want to make sure I'm good here. And I also kind of want to put myself forward here that I know what's really going on. And so Jesus responds back because he's got a big one on the line now. He's got a big one on the line. And I mean, this is the same way that he's done with you. This is the same way he's done with me. I mean, like your progression from coming from a person of, whether you're born in a Christian home or whether you were raised outside of the church or didn't have any religious experience, whatever. Jesus does the same with you. He grabs on to you and the things you're interested in, the things that like strike your eye and pull you aside. And then he gets down to your motives and what's really going on. And then it hurts. It hurts because your preconceived ideas of you like having it all right and having it all together go out the door in the presence of the one that actually does. And he does that over and over in our lives where we come to the place like, wow, Jesus, all I really need is you. Like I need just complete dependence upon you. And as I spend time with you, I actually do become a person that has it together more in these things because we learn to be like him. And so let's read Jesus's response to him because it's really, really good. So in verse 27, it says, the man wanted to justify his actions, so he asked Jesus, and who is my neighbor? Jesus replied with a story. A Jewish man was traveling from Jerusalem down to Jericho, and he was attacked by bandits. You love that word, bandits. I watched a lot of Westerns growing up. My name's Cody. My brother's name's Jesse. My dad's name is Christopher Covington Busick, but he's a cowboy, rode bulls and was a professional roper. And so his name's Chip, right? And so all this does a cowboy house. And I love the word bandit. It's just so good. And so they stripped him of his clothes, beat him up, and left him half dead beside the road. And so this road was known to be a place that this happened often. This was a scene that anybody could have come along. It happened often. And so it would have just been an everyday life thing that Jesus is describing to them. But then it changes when Jesus starts to lay out things deeper. By chance, a priest came along. And so a priest would have been somebody that this person's going to do the right thing. This person's going to be the example for what a neighbor is and how you're supposed to do this. But when he saw the man lying there, he crossed to the other side of the road and passed him by. And before you get too off here, maybe it's dark. Maybe it's desolate. And it was actually known that tricks would be played on this road where, there would be somebody faking it. And then you would go to help them and they would rob you, or you would get beaten up yourself. And so there's pressure here, people. I mean, this is not an easy thing. So the priest, he goes and he has something else going on. He can't help. And then a temple assistant walked over and looked at him lying there. But he also passed by on the other side. I mean, this guy here, he was at the temple. And so where the worship of God happened, like this guy was near the activity of God. Surely he would stop and and show mercy upon this man, this person, and help him. But he doesn't. He continues on as well. And now here's the thing that gets everybody. Then a despised Samaritan came along, and when he saw the man, he felt compassion for him. And so the contrast is this, is that the people that, you thought, because Jesus, remember, is getting after his loophole. Like who's the one that's righteous here, and who's my neighbor? And and it comes down to excuses, because the Samaritans were fully different than the Jews. The Jews had a deep hatred for the Samaritans. The Samaritans had a deep hatred for the Jews. There was arguments over religion. There was arguments over family trees and battles and who should have and could have and all kinds of stuff. And the Samaritans were very much looked down upon. They had intermarried with the people of the land, and they were seen as worshiping different. And you see Jesus interact with a Samaritan woman in John 4. But Jesus is always doing that. He's always pushing in to those that are different and pushing past social norms. So he's saying that a Samaritan came along, and when he saw the man, he felt compassion for him. So right away, Jesus, he's very clear. The observation is that the desired response, if you're going to be a neighbor, he's giving the man that was trying to justify himself the answer. Look, this is what it means to be a neighbor, is to show compassion. And it means like he felt something for the man. And the Greek word, it speaks of like this, like feeling it in your bowels, because that was believed that was where like the feeling and the compassion and the emotions came from. And so, like way deep down inside of you, you decided to feel. This is not surface level feeling, but you felt something deep down inside of you. And so he felt compassion for him. So he acted upon that compassion. He says, going over to him, the Samaritan soothed his wounds with olive oil and wine and bandaged them. I mean, you just see the picture here. I mean, he's taking of his own stuff. He's slowing down his life, and he's caring for this man, and he's caring for his wounds. He's basically doing triage here, right? Like he's an EMT, right? Except he's using olive oil and wine. And then he put the man on his own donkey and took him to an inn. And so now the scene is that he probably has to walk now. And so this is a huge inconvenience. But he felt something. And it says the next day he handed the innkeeper 2 silver coins, telling him, take care of this man. If his bill runs higher than this, I'll pay you the next time I'm here. And so Jesus is going big here. He's going big. He's saying like, look, feel compassion and let it affect your life. And then he says, now, which of these 3, Jesus says, would you say was a neighbor to the man who was attacked by bandits? Jesus asked. The man replied, the one who showed him mercy. Then Jesus said, yes. Now go and do the same. And so remember where this all started. He asked him a question, how can I be saved? And the man was looking for an easy transaction. But Jesus typically, as you approach him, if you want a transaction, he'll point you towards transformation. And you say, yeah, but I want to check it off. I want to check it off my list. And Jesus says, okay, great. Go down this road. It's just not as easy as we ever think. And so he's pointing him down the road of transformation, where he's saying, go and do likewise. And so he's answering that question and getting at the heart of it. So different is not an excuse, right? I mean, that's the hardest thing. You buy a home, or you rent a home, or you buy an apartment or condo, or you rent a condo or an apartment, and you end up where you're at, and then all of a sudden you find out who your neighbors are, right? And then they find out who you are. And then you find out that you're different. You absolutely do. My dad and I, when my parents divorced, my brother lived with my mom, and then my dad and I lived together. And they lived about an hour and a half away, and we lived where we did. And my dad was an MBA student at university. And so we moved around every 9 months to a year to a different kind of place, college town. And so we were different. I was at the high school and junior high, and he was going to school and working construction, and so we were different. And so like sometimes we lived next to college students, and which wasn't good for my extracurricular activities and things and stuff. And then sometimes we lived next to families, but we were still different. And some people were very much embracing, and then others, when we moved in, but when we moved out, they'd come over. Hey, so what's going on? You guys feel like you just got here. Now I would say, hey, by the way, I'm so-and-so. Because now that we're moving out, it's safe. But we were different. And so it was a real barrier. And I'll tell you though, I remember, I do that too. Like we lived, our first home that we owned in Oceanside in North County, San Diego. We lived there for 2.5 years, and then we moved to Colorado to pastor a church. And but there was this gentleman that always sat outside, whether it's raining or nice weather or whatever. And he just sometimes he's out there in his bathrobe. He just out there smoking a cigarette, just kind of chilling. And I still don't know his name. And I went back like 15 years later after we had moved, and there's the same dude, right? But he was right across the street, and because he was different, not because of the cigarette, he was just a different guy and all kinds of other things. But I just never, it never got there. He was different. Like I didn't feel like I saw myself, and so I didn't just walk across the stinking street. Now we do this, right? As we drive into the garage and, close down and everything else, different stage of life, all that kind of stuff. And so it wasn't just the people with my dad and I, we all do that. And so different isn't an excuse for us. It shouldn't be. So Jesus defines neighboring as having compassion and mercy, feeling for the other person. And think about it. Wouldn't Jesus put you around people that are maybe different so that you maybe would feel compassion or have mercy, right? I mean, a lot of times you find your fit with somebody else, friend or spouse, because they're different. Like you fit together. The things that maybe you're strong in are things that they're not so strong in, and they're strong in things you're not, and you fit together and you make something beautiful. And that's God's intention for the neighborhood as well. And so a good neighbor really changes the world. They really do. Here's a couple of quotes from a book called The Art of Neighboring. And one of the authors is a Vineyard pastor, Jay Pathak. He's actually going to be like the new national director of Vineyard here in this next year. And it says, he wrote, "If we say everyone is my neighbor, it can become an excuse for avoiding the implications of following the great commandment. Our neighbors become defined in the broadest terms." So what he's pushing against here with this is what we just read. Some people apply it like, well, yeah, hey, okay, no excuses. Everybody's different. And so I need to love everybody. And it makes it kind of like oh, wow, there's just too much to do. And so now everybody's my neighbor. And so there's just never enough time. That's not the point. The point is that what if we loved our neighbors, like the people right next to us? Another quote from the book is, "The problem is, however, that when we aim for everything, we hit nothing. So when we insist we're neighbors with everybody, often we end up being neighbors with nobody." And so I have two. I always keep a bunch of copies of this book. I only have 2 today. So the first 2 people that come up to me afterwards and want a copy, I've got a copy for you. And so I teach through this at least once a year, something similar to this on neighboring, and I always give out the books. So if you want one, come get me. No pushing or shoving though, okay? So, but I do want you to open your bulletin if you got that today, because there's a little exercise. We're not going to go through it right now. But what it is, it's a block diagram, and it's a block diagram that actually has you. And I know you may live out in the country, and but think, who are the closest 8 neighbors to where you live? And I first did this in 2005. I was at this area retreat with Jay Pathak, who designed this, and we spoke about and walking through. And it wasn't a book then; it was just something they were doing where they had their church. And they went around to hundreds of churches, and they call it the sheet of shame. or the block of, shame, because it's confronting as you walk through this. And so here, I don't want you to do it now, but I'd like you to encourage you to do it later. So first, in each block, write down the names of your neighbors, like your closest 8 neighbors, okay? What are their names? And at this point, you may need to say that guy, or that, right? But the hard thing is, right, if you've lived there for a bunch of years and it's been a while, it's 3 years later, I can't ask them their name now, and so that's okay. Write down the names that you know and as you know them. And then that's the first exercise. And then 2, write down anything that you know about them, just surface level. Not through observation, like they have a red car or whatever, but in other words, you've talked to them and you know that they're from Oregon, or they're from Washington, or that they have family that lives on the East Coast. Just something like surface level, but that you've learned from conversation. So that's a second level. The third thing is that write down anything of depth that you know about them, their dreams, their needs, their desires, their fears, spiritual journey, that kind of stuff. So something deeper, okay? So here's the statistics that they came up with. And this is in churches. As far as it was about 10% of people can fill out the names of all 8 of their neighbors. So, that's, but don't feel bad, okay? If you're doing better than this is the Midwest. I mean, I would expect our percentage to be a little bit higher, right? But it is deceiving in the Midwest, though, I will tell you that. Because neighboring is something that, is very important to our family. Like, it's very important to us. And we live it out. I will say that in some ways it's harder in the Midwest because there's this Midwest friendliness, right? Well, it's like, well, of course I know my neighbors, right? And there's the talking and doing that. But what can happen is that can become kind of a defense. Well, I talk to them, we chat it up, we do this thing, but it never really kind of goes beyond like where there's this knowing where you're known and they're known. It's almost like, the friendliness. Don't be mad at me. I'm Midwestern now. I've been 3 years, over 3 years. But it can become like a stiff arm, right? Like we're making contact, but I'm keeping you at a distance through that friendliness. And we never really get there where there's true, like, feeling in your bowels, like compassion, mercy, where I really know this person and they know me. So 3% can fill out like the second one, as far as like something deeper they know. And then 1% could fill out for every home, like, the really deeper stuff, like part of their journey. And so take that. And what we've done in the past is we've actually written the names on there that we know. And then we say, hey, we got to get to know these people. And so it's a way of getting to know them, in walking through that. We put it on the fridge or that sort of thing. So, we need to move past barriers of this though, because there's plenty of barriers. Like in part of your mind right now, you may be saying like, come on, Cody, you had me with, marriage being important and coworkers being important and parenting being important and friendship. But this, I mean, I don't have time for my neighbors, and besides, like you said, they're different. They're not the people that I would choose to hang out with, whatever. Well, let me tell you that where you are is very intentional. Like where you live is actually by design. God actually designed it that way, that you would live where you live and in this time as well. In Acts chapter 17, verse 26, it says, from one man, he created all the nations, speaking of God, throughout the whole earth. He decided beforehand when they should rise and fall. So the time throughout history, when you would live, God has decided that. And he determined their boundaries. Boundaries, speaking of where you live, your land. Like your home, no matter how small it is, no matter how big it is, God has determined that for you. His purpose was for the nations to seek after God and perhaps feel their way toward him and find him, though he is not far from any one of us. And so this is Paul speaking, and he's speaking to people, philosophers, and they would fly really high in life, but they wouldn't really land. And they had all these ideas. And so Paul's trying to get them to land with the one true God and about his intention for people. And so God has decided when you would live. He's decided where you would live. And I know some of you right now are like, well, I wish he would have decided better for me. Like I want a bigger house. Or look, I'm not getting into all that right now, but I'm just saying where you live and when you live, God has put you there. The second part of the verse 27, his purpose was for the nations to seek after God. And so he uses when you live and where you live to cause people to seek after him. He has a purpose for where you live. Absolutely every single one of you. And so this is the thing that should be freeing for many of us. Because I remember when I first became a Christian as a teenager, and one of the first things they told me, he says, look, read your Bible every day. Okay? Pray every day. Spend time with other Christians. Be at church regularly, be in a small group. And as I did that, I'm like, this is real. Like, this is like, I'm growing in Jesus. I'm growing in who I am. And then it was like, and you have to share Jesus. You have to evangelize. Like, I have to what? You have to evangelize. Because I didn't know any of the church terms or whatever. Well, it means sharing the good news. Okay. And as I did that, I'm like, well, these people don't think this is good news. And so I figured it out and whatever. And part of it was what they were telling me to say and whatever, figured it out better. But there's this pressure, right? Like if you speak about evangelism, it's probably one of the most shame-filled subjects that you bring up in a church because everybody feels like I should be bringing thousands to know Jesus. My quota should be much higher at this point, or just they're like, yeah, I love Christians, but I don't know about like reaching people for Jesus. I just don't know about that. And if I were to talk to somebody, I wouldn't know what to say. Or when I do talk about it, it's just awkward. It's a bad thing. And so there's a lot of shame filled with that. The answer for this, you guys, is neighboring. Not for you to play like a gotcha on your neighbors, like, all right, now I got them. And now I put on Christian music. I invite them to dinner and I have the Bible open when they walk in and I'm, wash their feet because that's what Jesus did. And, and like all this stuff. No, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that Jesus said, what did he say? Two most important things. Love God, love your neighbor. This whole idea, the problem with evangelism is that we think that we have to be evangelists. Cut that out. You just have to be a bearer of good news. One that brings light and love as you have received it. And the best way to do that is with neighbors because in your closest proximity. And so that's what's freeing about all of this is that we can all do this. So this is how good neighbors actually change the world. Like this is a practical steps for each one of us to say, you know what? The world needs to be a little bit brighter. You know what? This love, this little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine. This is how I can do it in my neighborhood with those people around me. First is that invest time in your neighborhood. Invest time intentionally with those that live closest to you. So put it on your calendar or be distracted from what's most important, you think, or be interrupted or interruptible with those people. You go do it or they come over and you're open to it. So one of the problems is that we don't see value in it. So give it value. It's incredible. Whatever you focus on will be what's most important to you. So give it value. One of the ways to do that is pray, God, give me a desire to be in relationship with my literal neighbors. He loves to answer that prayer. Like, give me the desire to be in relationship with them. And pray for your neighborhood and your neighbors. Like, pray for the real things that are going on. A lot of times we can kind of be like, oh, you know what's going on with them? Well, there's this going on, or man, look at that, or man, why do they have so many cars? Or, and only 3 of them run, and, like all that kind of stuff, right? But in reality, like, there's something going on with them, right? Like there's something going on. But again, a lot of times we don't cross that or see value in it until there's a fire truck outside their home or a moving truck outside their home. And then now we have interest sometimes, right? And so pray, God, help me to see my neighbors as you see them. Help me to love them as you love them. A barrier too is a lack of time. So listen, don't make this your thing, like your main thing. Love Jesus, love your family, love the people closest to you, and then invest small pieces of time with your neighbors and enjoy it, right? I mean, sometimes it's like, like when the first of the year, everybody goes on a diet or works out or whatever. It's like, all right, I'm all in, but like studies show by 3 weeks later, it's like, I'm all out. It just doesn't work for me, And so just small investments of time. There's a lot of times there's a lack of trust. Trust will follow value and time. So as you start to value your neighbors, as you start to invest small amounts of time with your neighbors, then you will trust and they'll trust you. So the most natural way to connect with people is through shared activities. So here's some shared activities. These are things that are happening in your neighborhood or your apartment complex absolutely every day. Baking or cooking. Okay. We typically, when somebody new in the neighborhood moves in, Michelle will make them something, some banana bread or cookies or that sort of thing. And we bring it over and quite honestly, sometimes people are like, oh, thank you so much. And they reciprocate and we develop a relationship. And other times it's like, hey, thanks a lot. See you later. And then we're kind of like, well, didn't we, we'll see them and didn't we bake you something? And it's just kind of like, quite honestly, we're kind of a loss. So now we're like, okay, well, what do we need to do? They're different. Maybe they don't like tasty things. I don't know. Maybe they're against that, right? And so we have to find something else, right? And so we find different ways to relate to people. Playing sports, right? Just throwing the ball around in the neighborhood. I mean, kids do it. Let's right? Jesus said, unless you become like a little child, you won't inherit the kingdom of God. I mean, what do kids do? They just get around all across our neighborhood. All the kids knocking on the door. Hey, can so-and-so come play? We're shooting, we're doing it. What if adults did that, right? Watching sports or other shows on TV, right? These are things that everybody's doing together. You can do this with your neighbors. Share a meal together, right? Invite them over and share a meal together, or you go over to their home, or this time of year, it's great. Like in our neighborhood, people bring the fire pits out front, and it's great weather, and as it's cooling off, and you make something and you share it together. You can throw a block party. We have a resource. I'll send it out to you guys by email. It's just like how to throw a block party. Most of the neighborhoods that we've gone into will say, hey, let's do a block party. And most of them will say, oh, we used to do that. And people love it. People love it. There's one neighborhood where they had done it all the time. And there was some, the people there a long time that, some had moved out and then there were some younger families that moved in like us. And they were just like, oh, we want to do that. And it was like this whole cul-de-sac, this whole street, like everybody came, but there was one house. And just FYI, they rejected like the cookies and stuff too. Like they wouldn't even take it like and throw it away. They rejected it, but we kept loving them, however we could. Right. But the majority of people will come to something and be a part of something. And it really became a special thing. And then the last thing is a key thing: ask for help or offer help. So one way I've gotten to know my neighbors, because if I do a project, like, I create all kinds of other problems other than the problem that I do. And so I'll drop the screw in there and I can't find it. Hey, do you have a magnet? And so I'll go instead of running to the store. And typically they have all the different tools, or if I see somebody else that needs help, I'll go help them and what they're doing and that sort of thing. Like, no, that's okay. We've heard about you. You make things more difficult, and but will you pray for me? Yeah, I'll pray for you. No problem. And so, but life gets fun when we know our neighbors. And then lastly, you guys, is that a good neighbor changes the world because it's the way of Jesus. It's just his way. And so if we are followers of his, then we love and care for our neighbors. And that doesn't mean that we don't see the difficulties. It doesn't mean that we don't see the problems. It doesn't mean that it's not hard. It doesn't mean that we don't have to push through and all those things. But it's the way of Jesus. It absolutely is his way. And so in John chapter 1, verse 14, it says, so the word became human and made his home among us. So speaking of Jesus, he was full of unfailing love and faithfulness, and we have seen his glory, the glory of the Father's one and only Son. The word glory, like it speaks of the weight of something or the substance of something. And that's what the world needs, you guys, is that people would know your weight, your substance. People found out what God was like, and they still are because of Jesus moving into the neighborhood, becoming one of us. And that's what happens with you and I, is that people would know our substance, that people would know our weight, and we would know other people's substance and their weight, like their glory. That's the way of Jesus. There's really no other way. There's lots of shows going on, but the way the gospel really moves forward is by people, flesh on flesh, knowing and loving one another. It's actually the real way that it actually happens. It's just being with other people.
Thanks for listening this week. If you are looking for ways to serve, give, or get connected, go to vkcwest.com.